Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming here. Seeing all of you in this format after a pandemic is a delight. Thank you so much. I would like to invite my colleagues, panelists, to come. Dr. Ruth, welcome. Mr. Raj, welcome. Mr. Benzi. Oh, thank you. Oh, be careful. No, you can sit. It's okay. Oh, there. Oh. Hello. Well, today we are honored and privileged to come here and discuss about two very important topics. One is the cross-border education, and second is the commitment of institutions to collaborate, universities as well as private. Cross-border education has been a key concern for all governments because they want to build the capacity. The first conference was held in a town called Arusha by African Union in 1981, where all the countries in Africa got together and put up a convention and the resolution to have cross-border verifications of the education systems. This was followed up in 1999 by European Union, which is known as the Bologna Convention, which formalized the transfer of the credits. But that is one issue. The issue with the institutions is how do they accommodate students from different countries and put them at par? Because the educational system itself is different. If you see, there are three major educational systems. We have American system, we have British system, we have French system. All of them are tuned to academics. But the American system is the one which is most conducive because it relates to the expertise in development of skills of the students to prepare them for real life solutions. Today, I have Dr. Ruth, who is going to talk about the collaboration and exchange programs. We have Mr. Billani, Pilani, I'm sorry, who is going to help us talk about the exchange programs. And we have these two wonderful gentlemen. I think so they should be on the venture capitalist groups because they make so much money and they have helped so many institutions make money. But we have Mr. Raj and Mr. Benzi, who will talk from the perspective of the public-private partnership and how to help the institutions in the exchange program. I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Dinesh Shukla. I'm the Chancellor and the founding president of American International University West Africa. We have been founded for 10 years. We follow the American curriculum. We follow the American exams, American certification. That is to ensure that the quality of the students are at par internationally. I'm privileged and honored to be as your moderator. I won't take much time. I would like each of my panelists to introduce themselves. We'll start with ladies first. Dr. Ruth, welcome.
Well, my name is Dr. Ruth Huey. I'm from the University of Washington in Seattle, and I teach in the Foster School of Business courses like leadership development, motivation, which is now performance management, and change management, and business, government, and society, quite a few courses, organizational behavior, that sort of set.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Saeed Bolani. I am the founder and president of 21st Century AI, as well as the Institute for Middle East Peace and Progress. I'm also a consultant and an advisor on education policy, development, and redevelopment, as well as matters of national and international security. As far as my educational background, I pursued my bachelor's degree at Georgetown University, concentrating in international affairs. Just completed my master's in education in international education policy at Harvard University, and I'm completing currently a Master of Arts in National and International Security at Georgetown School of Foreign Service. I will soon be commissioning as a Foreign Service officer with the U.S. Department of State as a diplomat, and I'm keenly pleased to be with you all today. Thank you very much.
Good morning. My name is Gali Orziv. I'm the CEO of the company called Everybody Loves Languages. I think perhaps the least educated here, and I have enough. And I think part of the conversation here is all about opportunity. Why do people pursue education? It's all about opportunity. No matter what track you take, no matter what pursuit you would like to have, education in its core is about opportunity. What we do is we try to bring some sort of a base level to that opportunity by teaching people, especially on a scaled level, languages. English is not my first language. If you can pursue something and you want to come to the US, I will say it in a different way. All things being equal, if you have the same skill as another candidate in any other country outside English-speaking countries, and you have English or any other language for that sense, you will probably earn up to 80% more. So what we do is we give an opportunity. And I'll be more than happy to continue and share more as we discuss.
Good morning, everyone. This is Raj Karan. I'm the CEO and president of a group called Malawa Ventures. I'm also a co-CEO for a company called Global Do-Gooders. I'm a technocrat, angel investor, and heavy into a lot of tech startups and innovation and incubation centers across. And I work with organizations in India, some of them in Africa, and also within the United States. I'm all about basically coaching in teams to get successful. I'm also tied into a lot of universities, and I also come from a founding family which basically founded 27 different colleges, all within a city called Hyderabad, where I was born and raised. And today we continue to do that, and we've just completed about 75 years, completely a not-for-profit organization, and we try to do this year after year. Also, the mission is to basically empower women and child development. So that's me, Raj. Thank you. It's my pleasure being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Raj. As we can see that all of the panelists are very well qualified. But more than that, all of you sitting here listening to this are also very well qualified, and we are privileged to have you. We want to make this more interactive, so please, we will keep some time for your thoughts, your ideas of how we can proceed further. GFEL has been very, very important platform for bringing in new ideas, for bringing in all the educators on one platform. As we can see, the pandemic has taught us one thing, and that is the whole world is like a global village. What happens in one part affects the other part. And that applies to the cross-border education as well. It's very, very important. Education and health, these are two platforms which are social, which have social economic impact on all nations. And the health of the nation depends on education as well as health. And so, cross-border education brings in a lot of value. This pandemic has taught us how to transform our education system and utilize the new technologies. But the new technologies are not available everywhere. I mean, they are available, but they don't have the infrastructure to do it. We had a panel discussion yesterday. We talked about the internet deserts. It occurs in Africa as a whole. That's number one. Number two, the capacity building of the African countries is tremendously lacking. Just think of it. America has 4,000 universities. Europe has 4,000 universities. Africa as a whole has less than 300 universities. With a population which is 1.2 billion. So, if we talk on global scale, we have to have equitable access, not only for students in America or in Asia or in Europe, but also in Africa, for the well-being of the entire world. That is our position, and that's why we brought the American education on a continent, the richest continent on earth in terms of resources, having the poorest people. People, it's unimaginable. And the students who are privileged in United States have to go and visit there to realize how blessed they are, to thank themselves to be born in this country and to be brought up. And that can occur only through exchange programs, through personal interactions, to looking at how people really stay, live, educate, work, and grow families. So, as far as the cross-border education is important, the exchange program has become even equally important in bringing in students who are the future leaders of this world. I would like to ask now, first we'll go on the exchange programs, and then we will go to the major part of it, which is the money part of it. And these two gentlemen are very well qualified to talk about the public-private partnership. No country in this world can prosper without adequate education and adequate financing, which can happen only through private resources. Public cannot handle everything. Government cannot handle everything. So let's start with what Dr. Ruth has to offer in terms of exchange programs and her views on it. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to first describe the program that I created at the University of Washington, and I ran it 4 times to Morocco. But then I'll come back to the subject of collaboration and why collaboration is so important. And then going forward, I'll show you where I'm going with this. And if you all have a country that you're interested in, I'm in the process of trying to get funds. I'm writing a grant to go forward for this. And so basically, this conference was heaven sent for me because I could find other educators around the world exactly like this gentleman, and possibly some of you too. So, okay, the program is called Triple Impact Africa. And so the triple means impact on the participants intellectually, leadership development that brings them to another country, so cross-cultural leadership development, and then agricultural development. So my students would go seed through sale the agriculture value chain. So when they would go over to, let's say, Morocco, they would go places like UNESCO, IFAD, the Agriculture Research Institute, the Chamber of Commerce, all of it. The physical part on the participants was a trek. As you probably know, the poorest places on the planet are the slums of the megacities, but also the deep reaches of the mountainous villages, the last places where the internet will reach. And so those are places where women could have 80% illiteracy rate, or the overall illiteracy rate could be 50, 60%. And so my students would trek to the bowels of the high Atlas Mountains, and then they would meet villagers, learn their issues, and their issues were always studied in a participatory manner. Okay, that's going to bring in another partner. And so that's an NGO partner. And then the students, the final part of the trip was they would write a grant. This is the spiritual part, so intellectual, physical, spiritual. They'd write a grant that would affect the triple bottom line of the developing country, financially raising money for agricultural products, socially, we would focus the grants on getting money for women. You know, actually during the coronavirus, I wrote one of these grants and it got 13,300 trees for 133 women in a valley in Morocco. This was separate from my program, but that's the kind of grant the students wrote. And they've actually got actual agricultural products to the villagers twice now. Thousands of dollars worth of saffron bulbs in that case. And then, of course, the environmental piece of the triple bottom line is we don't write any kind of project for agriculture that doesn't have a water plan, an irrigation plan. You know, so much of air or water is lost to irrigation that's in the air, so we would push for the irrigation systems that were into the ground. I'm blanking on the name for those now. So that's the Triple Impact Africa program, and I'm writing a grant for Triple Impact Global to try to bring this to other countries. But not just any countries. Obviously, the countries in my model have to have the mountainous areas, but I'll point out there's a peace-building function of my program. I was taking Christian American students, that's our predominant religion, to Muslim Morocco. Well, actually, I've broken down low, middle income, high income countries, and then by Christian, Muslim, and well, it's basically Israel as far as predominantly Jewish countries. But see, the point is to mix and match the different types of countries so that people see that, wait a minute, they're all the same religion. Those are all Abrahamic religions. Hence, you see the peace-building function to it. So back to collaboration, the key collaborators, you have your host university, then we have an American university, Al Akhwan in Morocco, and so, but you have to have a host university. You have to have an NGO. You don't then tell the farmers what to do. The NGO is ultimately going to have the grant be implemented. And in the past, I've used the Rotary Club. I'm a Rotarian to also help facilitate things, so I have the connections in the other countries to get the money to the NGO. And then, of course, another partner is always having the trekking company, the travel agency, because actually the guides, back to language, how important it is, the guides have the languages of the villagers. And what's interesting is that I took French in high school because I've been obsessed with Africa my whole life, and I forgot most of my French. I realized if I had to have a second language, I've had to study Arabic, not French. But the first language, you really need those trekking guides as your language guides. So that is my example of a cross-cultural exchange program and an opportunity possibly for those of you in the audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. That was very informative. Mr. Billani, please elaborate on your experiences and your vision.
Thank you very much. Beautiful presentation, Ruth. So I could talk a bit about the Institute for Middle East Peace and Progress. Now, obviously, this institute is based in the Middle East. Currently, we're focusing and homing on Lebanon. Lebanon's a country very challenged currently. If you guys heard yesterday, it's a country that's lost over 100% of its currency rate over the last year. It's a country that the government is pretty much in deadlock, pretty much since the great blast of August 4th of last year. And it's a country that many people are living, under, the poverty line. And that poverty line is just expanding and growing, and I think it's at a rate of just about half the country. So Lebanon's a country of about 4 to 5 million people, natural-based citizens, but over the last decade, more or less, its population has risen to approximately 7 million people. And that's in large part due to the Syrian refugee crisis, and before that, the Palestinian exodus. So Lebanon currently is a country of about 7 million people. So you'll find 1 in 4 people is a Syrian refugee or a displaced Palestinian. And so the idea in mind of the Institute for Middle East Peace and Progress is to kind of inspire the next generation of leaders in Lebanon to take charge, to lead the way for the future of their country. Again, with respect to the government, it is highly corrupt, and that's in large part why the country has one of the highest debts in the world. For a small country, it's, I believe, the 4th most indebted country in the world. And so the Institute for Middle East Peace and Progress, it identifies, recruits, and trains students and emerging leaders. It brings them on scholarship, on visa-visa exchange programs. It's a developmental leadership educational program. Brings students, for example, you may have a student who is interested in economics, in trade. You bring a student like that to Washington, D.C. You get them a mentorship opportunity or a shadow experience at the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, or the World Bank. They take and gain that critical insight, take it back to their country. If they're interested in political science, we work with our partners on Capitol Hill. We get them a shadow experience with a congressman, a senator. They take that wealth and experience of knowledge, take it back to their country, and help chart the future of Lebanon. And Lebanon is just one country that we're working with. Really, the idea is that the youth are the future of the country. And with respect, that's the case for all of the world. And so if we can give them these critical and requisite skills, and these transferable skills, the American way of life perhaps, they can take to their country and contribute to the democratic institutions in this country. And thereby, when you're strengthening and empowering and augmenting the democratic institutions, that weakens malign and stateless actors like terrorist groups, both in Lebanon and throughout the region. And that works towards the aims of peace, progress, and with the aim of prosperity, allowing people to move up the socioeconomic ladder, giving the opportunity for social mobility, and really just charting an aim of peace. And so it works as a U.S. diplomatic, in a way, it's basically a U.S.-Lebanon partnership. And what that also works as, it also creates the room for peace in the region with respect to Lebanon and its neighbors that it may not be friendly with. And it's a partnership that is a bipartisan pact. Currently, we're working with the presidential institutes here in the U.S., the Bush Center, the Obama Foundation. We're currently in talks with them, as well as Secretary Colin Powell, in terms of guiding this effort. So it's going to be a bipartisan, pretty much broad-based effort, because there is no partisanship to this. A strong, a prosperous, a peaceful Lebanon is in the best interests of the United States. And I think that's the same case for the Middle East more broadly. So if we can do something like that with a country as challenged, as diverse as Lebanon, like I said, Lebanon is a country of about 4 to 5 million people with 18 different sects. You have Maronites, Sunnis, Shiites, Druze, Armenians. I can go on and on. But if we could do something like that in a country like that, there is no telling what we could do in that region. So that's a little bit about the Institute for Middle East Peace and Progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pilani. We have to understand that the soft policies, diplomacies work the best with the educated mind. But education is not very simple. We have the primary school educations and the middle school, the high school, and then the universities. It's a complex system. It's a complex system like a jigsaw puzzle, which we need all the components to fit in properly to ensure that the right education, right frame of mind is given to students and nurtured to the students. With that, I would say that The exchange programs create a lot of opportunities to visualize and experience for students to go to other countries, visit other cultures, understand other cultures, and it is the understanding that is going to bring peace to this world. And education plays a very, very important role. Coming from academia, there are three things which the higher education really looks at. One is the administration. If the administration is good, then the university will thrive. Secondly is the students. If the students are good enough, and if there are enough students to really build up the universities, you will have some excellent students, some average students, but they all become future leaders in the world. And those leaders, if they are following the American system, which is a good system, because it deals not only with education, not only with training, but also with ethics, which is a very important aspect of it, and the creative thinking, ability to solve problems, that is where it comes. And I don't think so that any government alone can really overcome the educational programs. The European British system were mostly public. American system was combination of public and private, but we have seen that the private institutions really do well as well. But for private institutions, funding is very, very important. Money becomes a central aspect of development. So we talk about students, and the third most important thing in the third world, in the poorest countries, is the faculty. A lot of you here are teachers, educators, and if you feel like giving your time to the worthy cause of bringing up peace in this world, I would encourage you to meet us after this, because we don't have time to elaborate on this. You can become visiting professors. You can teach to the students through the digital revolution which we are going through online. You don't need to move to that country. That is where we are. So before we go any further on that, I would like to have views of how the public-private partnership can really facilitate the growth, peace in this world. I would invite him to do that.
Thank you. I'm going to be controversial, if you don't mind. First of all, Lebanon is one of the most beautiful countries in the world. They have the best cherries. And I don't know if you know, this is just a little anecdotal comment. If you want to sleep well, eat some cherries. Check that out. And Lebanese cherry, #1 in the world. When we look worldwide and we look at opportunity, when you look at how do you make things more equitable, I think we have two big challenges. When people sit in the US, they think everybody wants to be like America, but it's not true. They say everybody wants democracy. Well, outside of Europe, when you look at some democratic countries, they tend to be somewhat corrupt. Look at the elections in Peru, look at the elections in Ecuador. Every election these days seems to be corrupt. And if it's not a democratic country, if it's some sort of a dictatorship or one-person rule, they also tend to be very corrupt. I think the best example probably for showing how you can have transfer of knowledge was done by China. When China opened up in the late 80s and 90s, what they've done is they made tremendous investment in students, in their education system, and we work with the Ministry of Education of China. I can tell you the investment is tremendous. But they incentivized and they promoted and they encouraged students to go and study in Australia, Britain, the US, and take the best minds, having them go to the best universities, and then go back to China and build the economy, I think the results speak for themselves. China has the ability, I know there's a lot of demagogy around that, but China has the ability to think long term. They can think 20, 30 years down the line, and you can see the result. The challenge, no? Challenge with democracy is that, sorry, you get to rule for 4 years. How can you plan something for 4 years? How can you build an airport for 4 years? When you institute a policy in education, the results are only going to show in 10, 12, 15 years. Why would you do that when you can probably steal some of the money? Before pandemic, we had a project in Peru with the Ministry of Education where students who were pursuing a master's degree took a 2-year development program, including intensive English, in order to go to the US and study in the US and then go back to Peru and obviously help the economy. I think that's probably an optimal type of project that one can see with other countries. Of course, a person who helps one soul helps the universe. But when you have 1.3 billion people in Africa with 300 universities, that's going to be a little bit of a challenge. I think as human beings who care about education, who care about the opportunity of people in those countries, we have to somehow work on the system. And again, you know, maybe everything that I'm saying or something I'm not popular, and I have, I guess, some adversity for microphones. But the biggest challenge, I think, is long-term thinking. And I think the politics are killing the opportunities of our young generation. And you know, hopefully more countries can think like China, or that particular project we've done in Peru. And the problem is once that project was completed, new government, no more funding, and you go back to point zero. So, you know, I mean, we try our best, and we try to convince governments to take the right approach, but I think the core problem is the political problem.
Thank you. Go on. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, it starts with the politics, and it progresses with the politics and the government. But education is autonomous. I tend to disagree on certain aspects which are said here. While China has been very successful, I don't particularly appreciate their policies regarding the human rights. I don't want to bring that political issue here. But China has progressed because of money. And money is a key important aspect in development of the education system, which the poor countries cannot afford. They spend less than 2% or 3% of their GDP on education. And their GDP is very small. The whole GDP of a country will be 1/10 the size of the budget of the New York City. Not even 1/10, even more than that. So, money is a very important aspect in the education system. And to develop, to move from 300 universities to 500,000, 2,000 universities, the governments cannot do that. We need the private people to do that, the incentives to do that. And that's what American International University in West Africa has done. In 10 years, we focus on health and education. So we have all health colleges, plus we have the College of Management and Information Technology, because technology is an important aspect in development of education. We intend to build all these prototypes of universities where we have perfected the model to all these underdeveloped countries with the help of the private funding as well as public funding to a certain extent. And I would invite Mr. Raj to really talk about the collaborations which can really bring meaningful results in this world, especially in terms of pandemic.
Thank you so much. I don't know how much time I have, but I'll try to keep it brief and short. This is a very interesting topic. I appreciate all the enriching experiences and insights that you guys have provided. But it takes me back to 16, 18 years, right? So when I was going through my MBA program at University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, that was the first time ever. I do have a lot of academic background, but that was one university which gave me a kind of an exposure, a global exposure, a platform, I would say. My very dear friend and professor, Paul Magelli, who's no more in this world, but he taught me the entrepreneurship and how to basically cross-collaborate between not only within United States, but also globally, provided opportunities and platforms, and that's the first time ever I was on an international exchange program where I spent about close to a month in China. So I chose to go to China versus go to Europe, with all due respect, but at that time, a lot of action happening in China, right? A developing economy, there was too much of industrial revolution going on, and what have you. So at that point in time, the idea was to basically see, we've gained a lot of knowledge in the schools, in the university. How do you basically take the practical approach? How do you basically have students get exposed to a different setting, right? So you're very comfortable in United States. But when I graduate, when I get out of the university, how do I basically go about doing business globally? How do I venture out? What do I need to know? What tools I need to have? What skills I need to have? Let it be from the cultural aspect itself, let it be from the legal aspect itself, financially, and what have you, right? So a lot of times what we end up doing is students not having exposure to international markets basically makes them incomplete to a certain extent. Yeah, you have all the academic background and knowledge, but you can't implement it, right? So when you go and operate in countries like, say, India, say China, say Africa, right? Things are different. What works in America doesn't really work, even in Canada. Forget it, forget about going to Southeast Asia, right? So having a global 360-degree perspective for a student really is, to me, it's a mandatory thing in every single program that we structure, right? Maybe a semester, maybe 2 modules of that should be in a preferred country of choice for that student, and have those networks open up and be able to kind of complement their education. Today, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I'm an ex-Microsoft. I've seen the technology. I've lived it all, and I enjoy doing what I'm doing, right? But nevertheless, at one point in time, how many of you use Microsoft Excel here? Pretty much everybody, right? So one of the founders of basically the founders of Microsoft Excel, Mr. Shenron, right, was back in the day at Redmond, decided to go back to China because his country invited him, saying, "Hey, we need you here," right? So I was fortunate enough to meet him as well in China, and saw, right, from single-digit company, he grew up the company to, I don't know, like hundreds of people, and got the funding. There's a lot of funding out there if you really have a unique idea, a good technology to just basically market and promote. We can always bring in the private-public partnership to play and build that kind of an ecosystem together, wherein the students who graduate and come up with all the knowledge that you can think of can really implement them, irrespective of in which market they are. Today, I advise. I'm basically an advisor for universities within India. They've invited me multiple times. I go there to set up their technology and center of excellence for various technologies that we would love to really work in, right? For example, in the energy space. For example, I also promote a lot of electrification of vehicles. I'm in the EV space today, right? So I tend to do that. And obviously, students do really appreciate, because they're getting the practical, hands-on approach, and wherein we're trying to basically bring in the technology into those ecosystems or into those incubation facilities that you can think of, and be able to kind of continue on that path. I think that's me. And also, in fact, I did not realize that there's so much action that you do, and I respect that in Gambia. And I'm also, in fact, working on one project at this point in time in Gambia and also West African countries targeting some electrification program where we are helping their government to basically build some electric vehicles and stuff. So that's me. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Mr. Raj. I don't know how much time do we have. Another few minutes. I would like to hear from you. No one's perspective is ultimate perspective. Perspective of general people, educators like you, knowledgeable people, is very important for cross-border education as well as for collaboration. I would like to have some of you participate or at least talk about what your concerns are, what your vision is, and how we can move forward, because this is a very important topic. So I don't know if anybody would really like to add on their views or tell us and instruct us, because we are not perfect. We are still in the learning stage. Anyone? Go ahead. Yes, sir. Thank you, Professor. Well taken point, and you are on board the first one. Thank you very much. Anybody else who can contribute their thoughts on this? Yes, madam. Sure. We collaborate with universities and primarily through professors. Our first collaboration, we are only 10 years young. After 3 years, we started our collaboration with the University of Utah. And we had the professors come from Utah, visit us, teach our students. They were awed. They were thrilled. It's a personal experience. Plus, the knowledge is very, very specialized. We collaborate with Columbia University, and they send their students to our institutions to learn about education. We also, even from third world countries, there is a lot of mentorship which is going back to America. But your point is right. All that is required is the collaborative nature and the platform to do so. Just think of it. FAO got, the World Food Bank, I think so, they got the Nobel Peace Prize this time. Doctors Without Borders. These are the people who are ready to give. There are a lot of people, intelligent people, like professors, who can really impart the mentorship to the students. They require a platform which should be created. I agree with that 100%, and we would welcome, let's start with it. Let's have a meaningful dialogue and implications in the world. Anybody else who would like to elaborate on their thoughts? Thank you, madam. Sure, go ahead. I will ask Dr. Ruth to answer that.
I'll tell you how I do it. I always leave my students with this thought. I say, are you a citizen of the United States or are you a citizen of the world? I say that after I run a Tragedy of the Commons exercise. Are you familiar with that? And so a Tragedy of the Commons is basically a game scenario, but the upshot is you all participate, you all have to cooperate, or you all lose. There are so many examples around us, overfishing, nuclear holocaust, price wars, embargoes. But of course, before us now, a disease anywhere is a disease everywhere. So I think we have an opportunity now to see that we are citizens of the world. And so I personally use the Tragedy of the Commons simulation. It's very powerful, and I think that gets the point across.
Thank you, Dr. Ruth. Thank you very much. One thing which we have noticed in recent years is that all the countries have become more focused on their own population, on their own societies before they go out. This can be seen really in terms of the vaccinations which are provided in Africa. I come from there. I live in US, but I work there in Africa, where not even 5% of the people are vaccinated. Forget about 5%, not even 1%. And there's this pandemic going on. So all these countries have started to look at their own resources and development of those resources. That's where the capacity building comes. And you're not going to have 100% participation of 100% people. Even if we have 1% of participation, that will start. It's a good start. I would say that those who are willing to work, to invest in the frontiers of the world will really get the benefit of it. But they should be willing participants. And I think so there are adequately enough professionals available in this world who are willing to do it, not for the sake of money. Being an American, having lived in America for 40 years, having all my children go through the medical schools and law schools here, in US, I decided to go and invest in Africa because that's where it's required. A hospital will not have enough material what you find in a doctor's private practice over here. When you see people dying for lack of simple things like sutures, it hurts you. That's where humanity comes. That's where individuality comes. That's where you can make a difference. But you can't make a difference in one day. Let's take a step forward. There are two things which are concretely coming out of this. One is collaboration. Those who would like to collaborate in third world countries, you're welcome to. Those who want to collaborate through their educational systems, universities, they are welcome to. Those who are willing to collaborate from state to state, you're welcome to. So let's start something meaningful from this day onwards on this GFEL conference and make a difference. We heard so many people. Now it's time to act. Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Madam. Thank you, sir, for providing that information. And thank you very much. We have taken a little bit more than we should have. And I will just give the mic to all the panelists for a minute to thank all of you.
I just have a quick thank you. I don't want to be between you and the clock.
Well, thank you very much. It's been really a pleasure to speak with you guys. Just know that, you know, in this post-COVID environment, we're charting a new territory. And it's not going to be America alone, and it shouldn't just be America. You know, America is only as good as its friends and its neighbors. And if we can't contribute to their autonomy, then our country will not see the next decade. So we need to work with each other. Because like I said, a stable, a sovereign, a prosperous Africa, a Middle East, a Europe, it is only in the best interest of America. And going into this next decade, if you have two countries, for example, China and Russia and Iran partnering together, America's gone. Our greatest strength is being united. The day that America becomes divided is the day America is no longer the world leader. We must seek and heed that guidance. We must remain reminded. Thank you very much.
Nice, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I really want to thank GFEL organizing committee for putting up such a wonderful conference here. Thank you all. Well, my pleasure meeting everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to my little rant. However, I think COVID, with all of its negativity, may have awakened all those global citizens to realize that perhaps looking locally may not be the solution. And today, with access to information on the internet and any other platform, perhaps COVID actually had provided some sort of a, kick in the behind to many of the nations to take maybe a different approach to things, to how they look at education, how they look at their population. Because if they continue in the path that they do, as we heard from our esteemed colleagues here, sometimes the reality is not very, very pleasant. So let's hope that perhaps there's some lemonade that was made out of this terrible masked lemon.